All right, welcome back, everyone. It's me, Daniel, with VintageMagic.com, and we're with our buddy Jeff. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Daniel. How's it going?
Good. Jeff is from Southern California area, and that is where people like famous movie stars, Disneyland. Well, that's in Orange County, right? That's Orange County is.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Southern California. Yeah. So if you guys ever visit down there, they have great weather over there. All right, so if you guys have watched our deck tech video with Jeff, Jeff shared his awesome collection. You've had for what, 12 years? You said?
Well, I've been collecting since the mid '90s, but yes, I accumulated that particular chunk of it since about 2002.
And this collection, guys, I will put the link in the video below. And it is incredible. It basically is obviously circa 1994-ish. Yeah. And it was from a gentleman named Brian Pantera, right?
No, let's try Paul Pantera.
Paul Pantera.
Or Brian Weissman.
Brian Weissman, yeah. And the video describes all the details. Check it out. But basically, I wanted to have Jeff talk about kind of a storytelling time. Share with us, you know, kind of your beginnings of how you started, and like when you first encountered magic. What was this thing that you saw, and what gravitated toward you? Yeah,
I was living in Sacramento. Oh, sorry. Let's try that one again. I was living in Sacramento, and a friend of mine for many years. We both played Dungeons and Dragons and other similar pencil and paper games. He had a roommate who had introduced him to magic, and he called me up. He's like, "This is great! You got to see this thing. It's really awesome." And well, okay, fine. I came over. We played a couple of games. We had some of the rules wrong, and because we were playing a slightly incorrect version of the game, I wasn't really that impressed. I was like, "Nah, okay, you know, it's neat, it's new, it's different," but I wasn't hooked. He was, and his roommate was, but I was take it or leave it. But it turned out that about 2 years later, I moved to, I got a new job in Maryland instead of in Sacramento. And I moved to Maryland, and a bunch of the people that were there were already playing. Were into it, and they knew more about how to play correctly and the rest of that stuff. And I got hooked. So I started playing between 95 and 2000. And during that time, that's when The Dark came out. That's Tempest, Alliances, Ice Age, stuff like that. That was also the era of both Fallen Empires and Homelands, both of which were very, very disappointing to the playing community. I started to play a little bit more seriously. I was making a little bit more money. I could afford slightly more expensive hobbies. And I liked control decks, ones that played slower, gave you more time to develop strategy while playing. I think that later on it became strategy was relegated to the deck build, and then it was all tactics during play. And I liked a little bit more strategy in my playing time. And so I gravitated toward control decks, and that was kind of where I got started. Round about then, 1995, this guy named Paul Pantera posted an article or a question to a mailing list that I was part of, MTG Strategy L. And there's a copy of it right about here. See here for link. And I read it. He was talking about Brian Weissman's deck, which was very popular in the Northwest and was composed of approximately the entire restricted list, plus moats, Sarah Angels, and counterspells. And I loved it. I thought it was a great style of deck. I enjoyed playing it very much. I didn't have the prices of the Moxes in the earlier Alpha Beta Unlimited set had already risen. Those were already over $100 in order to get those when I was playing. Ancestral Recall was still only about $75, but it was still sort of out of my range. And I played other similar decks, but I didn't accumulate all of the Moxen and Lotai and the rest of that stuff necessary to play a full version of the deck. And that's kind of how I got started. I played for years. I moved back to the West Coast, and I sold it completely out of Magic cards twice. I very much enjoyed the trading, the wheeling and dealing. I enjoyed it even more than a lot of. Let me start over again. I enjoyed it more than even the playing many times, and because of that, I tended to accumulate cards. I would end up with more dollars worth of cards than I had spent dollars on.
Yeah.
And because of that, I was able to sell out of Magic a couple of times and be cash positive on the game as a whole. And more recently, I did that again. I had accumulated most of the Power 9 and some pretty old editions, and a bunch of other stuff. And I had the deck that I had played, the control deck that I had played, just as individual cards mounted on the wall, framed and hanging on the wall. And I'd been looking at that for about 10 years at this point, and decided maybe I'm done with Magic for now, and sold my collection. And here I am with Vintage Magic owner Dan.
Yeah, guys, I'm here, and this is very fascinating, guys. You brought up something very interesting to me. You said to me, you just said to all the viewers that you found trading somewhat more fascinating, and talk about, if you could think of one deal that stands out in your mind. What is a deal that, and you tell us the numbers or the prices if you can, to give us a relativity of what people see today, right?
Well, I think the most important part of trading is to realize that there are at least three groups of people in Magic. There's the people who are trying to complete sets. Okay, so if this guy's trying to complete his set of the Dark, he doesn't care that a Wand of Ith is not particularly valuable or particularly playable. He needs that Wand of Ith in order to finish his collection. So that the collector side is very much a check the boxes. I have that one, I have that one, I have that one. And so to those people, cards are worth one set of values. To another group of people, who are usually the players, a counterspell is just as useful as... they'd rather have the counterspell than they would have an Iron Star, which might be a rare at that point, because the counterspell is much more useful. And then there's a third group of people who just go by the price guides. All right, if you can give them, four $4 cards, they'd rather have that than a single $15 card. And that's $16. Four $4 cards is $16. That's more than my $15 card. Let's make that trade. And so, if you're looking for what you want, you got to give the other guy what he wants, right? So since this, individual card that you're holding is worth a different amount to all three of these guys, there's always another way to make that trade, all right? And because there's always another way to make that trade, there's a lot of thinking, doing, interacting, and meeting everybody's goals. I mean, it's such a corny bit now that it's in commercials where they talk about win-win. But in trading, you really can. You can complete that guy's collection by trading your totally unplayable rare for his 5 totally playable uncommons, right, or for his totally playable but spare rare.
What were you looking for as a trader back in the day? What are some of the cards and things that you would look for value in trades?
Okay, the cards back in the early 90s that were always really valuable were dual lands. The big rares would have been like Shivan Dragon. Wow. Okay, and now I run dry. But Shivan Dragon, other stuff like that.
Force of Nature?
Sure, Force of Nature, Ma Modi Jin.
Okay.
The big
Serendipity Free Jazam.
Yeah, Serendipity Free
right,
would be a good example. Juzam was already out by the time I was. Juzam Jin was sort of out of the lower end trading.
It was high end already.
Pile. Yes. And so, yeah, large creature rares were always popular, and they always will be. They're something that, particularly among younger players, they're the big splash card. When you put it down on the table, when you get it into play, it's an ooh-ah kind of moment. And so that has value to that person. And you want to as much as possible, you want to accommodate everybody's desires. And that's how you make headway trading.
Right. Well, that's awesome. So, you know, you talked about trading. You talked about your early days. You sold a few times. So, why did you do? So what made you prompt you to sell the first time?
I sold the first time because I had a couple of friends who had gotten in deep. They had spent a lot of money on Magic, and it only looked like they were going to spend more. And I thought, ooh, wow, these guys are kind of getting stuck. You know, they're ending up. This is a money pit hobby, and they're not even satisfied with what they currently own. They've spent more than I have, and they're not happy.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, that's bad. You shouldn't spend more money and get less happy. And so there was an article way back when in the Duelist by a guy, by the first world champion, first Pro Tour champion, a guy named Zach Dolan.
Right.
And he wrote this article how he had gotten rid of all his Magic cards, or at least stored them, and bought a single starter deck of Revised, and then just played with those cards plus the cards that he could trade for. And so he was playing with this deck, which had several dual lands, several large creatures, and the rest of that stuff. Very expensive. I mean, if you were to the cash value of the deck at the time was probably a couple $100. And he had spent $7.95, which was how much one starter deck was. And he was trying to make the point, you don't need to spend a lot of money on Magic. And I was swayed by that argument. So I sold out completely. I sold to a local store, right over the counter. Sold for $3,000, which was more than I had spent at that point.
It's a lot of money.
And
for like 90s,
it was
the mid 90s.
Yeah, late 90s.
Late 90s, okay.
And for me, that was a lot of money. It was $3,000. Wow! That was real money. And so I sold out, and I turned around as soon as I sold to the dealer right there, and I took, of the $3,000, I bought $7.95, one starter deck. And I started the Exact same path that Zach did. And over the course of the next year, I proved he was absolutely right. By a year later, I had accumulated several $100s worth of cards, and I was playing again. I hadn't stopped playing. I had played some booster draft and some other stuff like that, but I had been accumulating cards based on one starter deck again. And that went on again, and then I was moving. I was moving back to this coast, and that prompted my second sell-off, just because I didn't want to lug all of these cards around anymore. Mm-hmm. And then when I got back to the West Coast, I had a little bit more money. I had a very good job, and I thought, you know, I'm going to accumulate all those cards that I couldn't afford 10 years ago. I'm going to get them now. And I just started putting them together. When I'd see a cheap one on one of the mailing lists, or I'd see somebody who wanted to trade one for something else, you know, for a different collection, I'd make an effort. And so I accumulated a lot of the Power 9, and then started, okay, I'll bite the bullet and actually buy this one retail and fill in a few blanks. And
so you're collecting at that point.
Yeah, I really was. I had a particular collection in mind. I wanted all the Power 9 and a couple of others. Yeah. And I started accumulating them again, and that was all after 2002. And then I filled out my collection. I'm like, okay, I got where I wanted to go. I was playing that deck. I enjoyed it. And then I moved, and I didn't end up in a group where there were a lot of players. I didn't end up in a town where there were a lot of people who played. And so my deck just sort of stayed in a little stack on a shelf. You know, here's the 60 cards that I play with. It's like, okay, well, that won't do. So I ended up taking them out of their sleeves and putting them in a frame. And There's probably going to be a picture of it in here sometime. And I framed him and I hung him on the wall, just as a sort of little bit of my collection and as a playable deck. And people would come over and and say, "Oh, this is Magic, right?" And even though they weren't players, they knew what it was. It was a conversation starter and a piece of art that I lived with for almost 15 years, and now I don't have it anymore.
Yeah, so guys, that video is going to be actually below in the link, and we'll go over that in a separate video. That's very fascinating. So you've evolved from, but you've always played, right? You've always played here and there, correct?
From 1994 to 2003, I played continuously.
Right.
But since 2003, 2005, I haven't. And that's why it's just been artwork on my wall.
Now, when you were in the scene, right? Are there any stories of maybe playing for Auntie or?
I played for Auntie. I played for I only played for Random Auntie, which is the original, totally old school shuffle, cut, and then turn over the top card, and you're playing for that card.
What?
That was the original Auntie rules.
Wow.
Right? The original Auntie rules were everybody shuffles, everybody cuts, top card goes to one side. You can't play with that card. That's your Auntie. And
you've seen Black Lotuses. Everything will get lost. True.
Oh, I never saw any really. No, I have never seen that. But I have seen valuable cards of the day. Things that were pretty important to that person's deck.
Right.
Lost. But maybe a dozen games in my whole life have I seen that.
Right.
After that, it rapidly went to either no Auntie, because they took all the Auntie cards out.
Right.
Starting following Legends, I think. I think the Legends was the last. Is that right? Antiquities, maybe?
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah.
And they were still printing them in revised 3rd edition. There were Auntie cards, Demonic Attorney, and at the very least,
Contract
still
Below. Yeah.
Contract from Below, exactly. And so they were still printing Auntie modification cards in revised. But then they went out in 4th, and by then everybody had stopped playing for Auntie anyway. I played for set Auntie more than once, which is, you'd say, oh, okay, because I know my deck is stronger than yours, I'll Auntie up something decent, and because I know, you're just putting that one together, you'll Auntie a forest, or whatever. And so you'd still play for Auntie, but it would be a skewed Auntie based on, okay, where your particular decks are at that time.
Right.
So it's kind of like odds making. Don't tell the feds. But so I've played for set Auntie, again, a dozen games or so. But it fell out of favor. It really did. I mean, people just decided, no, that's not how we want to do this.
Right.
And so that's my entire experience with Auntie.
You were telling me something very intriguing. The story about the loss of confidence with collectors when the whole Chronicles and reprints came out. You got to share this. This is an incredible story, guys, about how this came about.
This was the beginning of it's not the restricted list. What's it called?
Reserve list.
Okay. Sorry, I don't think it was called that when I learned about it. So
right.
My vocabulary,
it's called the reserve list.
My vocabulary is 25 years out of date at this point.
Sure.
So the reserved list appeared, I think it was Chronicles, because I think it was in Chronicles that they reprinted Killer Bee as an uncommon. And that was a very, very, it was a rare in Legends that everybody thought had gone out of print forever. And B, it was a particularly useful playing card. It was a good card. It wasn't just rare. It was a good rare. And they reprinted it as an uncommon in an unlimited set. And the collecting community collectively lost their mind. I mean, they came apart at the seams.
Wow.
And they were banging on, petitions and all kinds of, a lot of very angry people when it was a $40-ish rare at the time. I mean, it was a pricey
Holy
out of
mother
print
of
rare.
God, that's a lot.
And all of a sudden it was worth maybe $2. Right, because it's an uncommon in a currently printed limited set. So a lot of people took great exception to that particular reprint, and thus the reserved list was born. And at the time, everybody expected them to put a lot of cards on it, including Mana Drain, which was known to be substantially overpowered, and they didn't put Mana Drain on the first reserved list. And everybody's like, wait a minute, what? Are you going to reprint that one? And one of the guys from WotC actually posted a note saying, that will only be reprinted if the entire design team is collectively hit by a bus.
Well, it recently did. An Iconic Masters.
The concept of Iconic Masters...
that set is being hit by a bus, by the way. That set was horrible.
Really? How can you have a set that includes Mana Drain that is horrible?
Okay, I'll tell you why it's horrible. Because it was called Iconic Masters, and the set is not iconic. Now, Mana Drain is iconic. But other than that, you would think like Shivan Dragon, Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, okay, Lightning Bolt is a good example.
Those were not reprinted.
Okay.
So or it was not included in Iconic Masters.
Okay.
So when you say that comment that hit by a bus, I'm literally telling you that Iconic Masters was hit. No, the MSRP for Iconic Masters is $10 a pack, basically. $240 a box, right?
Yeah.
They're only selling for like $120 shipped. That's how
that's gotta hurt.
Yeah. So my whole point is that it's one of the worst, if not the worst box of Masters.
No. Homelands has got.
Okay. No. I'm talking about modern day era.
Oh, okay.
For Masters.
Because you got to go back to Homelands and check out the gems that they put.
It was pretty crappy. It was pretty crappy. So you're telling. So this kind of started an incredible loss of trust between wizards and collectors. Talk about like the days of. Do you remember the days of those wizards? How would you call it? Those Wizards of the Coast retail stores. Remember that?
I have heard of them, but there wasn't one in any of the places. There wasn't even one in Baltimore.
Okay.
They were still dealing with a secondary distributor. As far as I know, there was no WotC store anywhere in Maryland. So
they didn't make it. See, they had tons of them in Seattle because obviously it was the Washington area. But so it didn't even make it to the East Coast, really. Wow.
At least not Maryland. And
right.
Maryland was. I mean, New York and Atlanta both had substantial Magic playing scenes, but Maryland was not far behind. In the Baltimore, D.C., Laurel area, there was a lot of people playing Magic.
And like, speaking of stores, how is the LGS scene, the local game store, how was that back in the day? How was that experience? Was it a
local gaming store? Well, most of the local gaming stores were converted comic book shops. And they would very grudgingly either move aside or close down maybe one of those, 8-foot bins, tables, and set up a regular table for people to come play Magic. And it was a transitional time because it's square foot is king, right? You need to make profit for every square foot of your store. You have to turn over this many dollars per month, or you're not even going to make rent. And the prior experience that comic book shops had with that was with TSR, and TSR modules and Dungeons and Dragons and the rest of that stuff. And a bunch of them had literally gone out of business trying to accommodate playing games in a comic book store. And they couldn't turn over enough money selling one module to 8 people who wanted to play it over the course of a week. They couldn't make enough money doing that.
Right.
And so a lot of them had been burned. So the LGS, is that what you called it?
Yeah, local game store, yeah.
Local gaming stores did not want to set aside square footage for playing tables. That just wasn't going to happen. And then Booster Draft came in. And as opposed to Type 1 and Type 2, which were the early divisions, they have new names now. But when Booster Draft started getting more popular, then square feet was dollars again. And they, because they were going to sell to every person playing there, they were going to sell $8, $9, $10 worth of cards. And all of a sudden they could make their profit for their square footage. And the tables started showing up. And ever since then, local gaming stores have tables. But they didn't when I was playing. There was only one, actually, within maybe 10 or 15 miles of my house. There was only one of the comic book stores, there was only one of the gaming stores that had any tables for playing at all.
Wow, guys, that's crazy. Imagine the days where there was just comic book stores and there was no gaming places to play.
Right?
This is the Wild West.
You played at somebody's house, or you played at a convention center at a tournament.
Yeah, versus now you're just playing at the LGS, or yeah.
Exactly.
Wow, that's incredible. You know, guys, there's so many questions we could ask Jeff, but I think we'll end it here and ask this last question. And we talked about this over dinner. It was probably one of the most interesting topics.
9.5 inches.
9.5 inches. My question to Jeff was what direction is Wizards heading in his eyes? What does he think that it's heading the right direction? And I guess I also asked him, why did he sell his collection? And he also has his personal reasons, but there's some very interesting business reasons that really, that I want him to share with us, because I found it very intriguing. So Jeff, why don't you just tell us about that?
I think that now, okay, right direction, wrong direction, totally depends on who you are. Are you a player? Are you a stockholder in the company? Do you collect? So understanding that Wizards of the Coast and its new incarnation in Hasbro is serving many masters. And so when you talk about right direction, wrong direction, you have to ask for who, all right? So if you are a casual player, the current environment where you're only playing with the last couple sets, when you go to a tournament, you're not facing people with $1,000, $10,000 collections and a deck full of Moxes. You're not playing them. They're not part of the scene. So as a casual player, somebody who wants to just put their toe in, try it, and leave, the current situation, the current system is quite awesome. You're only playing against the last year and a half worth of cards, and that's awesome. As far as collectors are concerned, it's a little harder, because now nobody oohs and ahs over your collection anymore, because if your cards are 3 or 4 years old, nobody can even play with those anymore, right? Nobody cares. Not only that, as a sort of long-term collector, a lot of the older cards don't mesh well with the newer cards. If you've got Madness cost, okay, or phasing, or what was the one where if you were blocked by another creature that didn't have the special ability, the creature got -1/-1.
I don't remember.
It was sort of a side attack thing. You were a faster critter. It was a variation on First Strike, and these things don't mesh as well with the cards that I bought this weekend, or they're totally broken with them. You know, like, oh well, okay, that thing isn't in phase anymore, so my Wrath of God, is a winner. And so because the effects in each new edition vary so widely, it's a little harder on the collectors. It's a little harder on the people who would play Type 1, because now there are so many, the huge number of cards that are available in the super old formats. It's almost a matter of, wow, who got the awesome combination first, right? It's like, oh, okay, so we played 3 rounds, somebody got their combination, and they won.
Right.
And so that there isn't as much strategy, or there isn't as much strategy. There's a lot more tactics in the game now. And I think that if I were a Wizards of the Coast Hasbro stockholder, I'd be thrilled. All right, we're still turning over cards. We're still attracting new players. It's an easy game to get into. Parents aren't going to lose their mind, that my kids spent $1 billion on special Magic cards. So as a stockholder, I think that's awesome. As a quick new player, I think that's awesome. As a collector or an older sets player, there's a certain, I think, changing of the guard. That people who have been playing for longer are going, oh, okay, I've done my Magic thing. It's not really applicable. If I took my old deck in today, I wouldn't be able to play at the local gaming store, because everybody would go, what the hell's that?
Right.
And so I think that people like me, who have owned cards for 20 years, or had them hanging on the wall for 15, are starting to cycle out. And there have been other indications that in some of the more recent videos from Wizards of the Coast and other organizations that there have been sort of a declining number of new signups for the tournaments and the rest of that jazz. I think if people are... I think that's a factor I think that this is caused by the new, very transient card styles. That this doesn't mesh well with what came before, but it meshes well with what we're going to print next month, and it'll make for a great tournament. And so at that point, I was like, okay, so I couldn't even put these cards in my frame back in a deck and then play it anywhere locally, no, because it wouldn't be relevant.
Right.
And so that was one of my reasons for selling what I had.
Yeah. So your projection is, you obviously, you don't really know what will happen, but
God no.
But it seems to me like you were saying, the kind of net decking or having these 2 or 3 or 4, whatever, in the same deck makes it very robotic.
I did leave that out. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Let me.
No, that's fine.
What I had said
of
earlier,
course.
Which was, if you go into the local gaming store and you watch who's playing, when I was playing at first in 94, 95, if you were watching 10 people playing seriously, I mean, they're actually trying to beat one another in a casual play environment. If you were watching 10 people, you'd see at least 9 different decks. Okay, they didn't have anything to do with one another. This guy's got a Living Lands Tim deck that's actually land destruction. This guy's got a mono black Juzam Hymn to Torak. This guy's got red and green land destruction. This guy's got discard. This guy's got Stompy. This guy's got Armageddon. This is, I mean, a million different strategies, all to play in a million different ways. And I think that now, if you go into a local gaming store, you're going to see about 3. You'd be lucky to see 4 substantially different decks being played. And I think that that's because since everybody's playing with exactly the same cards, everything gets distilled down into, okay, well, only these 2 or 3 different strategies have any hope of winning in this environment. And that takes away from some of the creativity. That takes away from some of the, oh, I got an idea. I'll try this card with this card. I think not having a bunch of different paths to victory, not having a bunch of different fresh ideas on the table, subtracts from the enjoyment for me personally.
But that's kind of what the direction of tournament magic is. It's about winning, right? About winning more money, being the title of winning, right? That's what
I think it gets distilled down to that pretty quickly. Yeah, I think that I don't know what the term net decking means, but
net decking is when the decks are pretty much like what you just said. It's the definition of having the 3 type of deck, like not very many variety or creativity. It's having just certain types of decks win all the time.
Okay,
and you're just basically having tier 1 decks to win. You're not really doing anything.
I find that a little boring. Maybe I'm just getting old. And well, I've got gray hair here.
I think
I'm getting old. But here's my thinking. I think that among younger players, it really is about winning. But if you're a little bit older, you're looking for more new thoughts on any given day.
Well, what will keep a company more alive? Now, think about it this way: what will keep Wizards going stronger? The younger players who just play to win in a tournament, or is it keeping them engaged throughout the years, always playing Magic in a casual way? What will lift a company through the end? Is it a combination of both?
I think we can safely look to the computer gaming industry and see that there used to be a bunch of different massively multiplayer games, and at any given time, there's only one. Everybody plays that one because that's where everybody is. And so I think that the computer gaming industry has proven that the money, the ongoing money, the week-to-week money is very much in people who just want to show up, try it for a while, and move on. It's got to be easy to learn. It's got to be easy to play at least reasonably well. And you've got to be able to make your money and then be done with that particular player. And that's not what people like me are interested. That's not what attracts me. But I think that from a financial perspective, excuse me, let me try that one again. But I think that from a financial perspective, that Wizards of the Coast is positioning their game well. They're producing a game that's got lots of turnover, that's got lots of they're keeping their price point really low. Booster Draft is still alive and well, and a lot of people are playing it. And I think that they're making a very good financial decision. It's just that that's less interesting to me personally, and probably to one or two other people.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is great, Jeff. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible storytelling time. There's tons of questions, guys. Guys, if you have any other questions or comments, please put it on the comments below. Maybe I'll forward some back to Jeff. Jeff may be looking at doing some YouTube stuff in his industry and stuff in the future. If he does, I'll be sure to put his link in the video below in the description. All right, Jeff. Hey, thanks again for your time. Have a safe flight back to SoCal. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, everyone.